Sanjay, we'll let you do the honors, and then we'll look for the other microphone.
We have a great set of panelists for you tonight. I want to introduce them one by one, although they don't really need an introduction here. But a woman who is basically the human version of the Wolverine, Hillary Allen. You hear Hillary? Talk to her about optimism and all these wonderful things.
You want to tell them why you call me Wolverine?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I feel bad because it's like you shouldn't be defined by a 150-foot fall off a cliff in an ultra race and an incredible recovery, both physically and spiritually and emotionally, to have podium one race where you're number 2 at the.
I won.
You won, yeah. A year later, after falling off a cliff, she wins the race, just indestructible inwardly and outwardly. We have Noah Drawdy here, who's a sub-62-minute half marathoner. Is pretty unbelievable, top 25. We have Todd Straka, one of the mainstays of the Boulder running community, race organizer, boulderrunning.com. Just an incredible person all around, and if you don't know him, shame on you. We have Will Lear here. I believe, Will, your partner Aisha is here as well. Between the two of them, they probably have the fastest combined 2-mile time of any couple in history, regardless of gender. One is a combined 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Between the two of you. Well, that's a lucky man. So we'll take questions from the audience after I kind of run through around all the things that I want to ask these folks. I mean, I'm huge fans of each and every one of you, and I want to find ways for you guys to reveal your secrets tonight, in part or in whole. So Hillary, I'll ask you the first question. Optimism and running. Not just optimism from recovery, but when you're kind of punishing yourself in ultra-distance races, how do you keep
Through running, I understand there's peaks and valleys, and so that when the bad times come, I always hold on to this belief that a good time will come after it. Yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get out of those things, but I've never been disappointed with challenging myself to the point of exhaustion, wanting to give up, because it always seems to get better. Yeah, I mean, I had a year-long recovery. I mean, it's still ongoing, but that's the one thing that kept me going, is this idea of believing that something good, or that something was going to come out of some sort of struggle. So that's always what I think about when times get hard. Yeah, just to believe that something different will come. Maybe it's more pain, but eventually the good has to come.
So how do you define success and failure? Is it time? Is it podium? Is it feeling? Is it recovery? Is it survival in every sense of the term now? I know it's tough to go on some of the technical courses. I'm sure that there's inner issues of fear that are programmed in you that you probably trying desperately to shed.
Okay, what was the first part of that question?
Success.
So defining success. So, I mean, I think it's really hard in the world of running because, I mean, even though this panel, I mean, our specialties are completely different. So, me trying to run, a fraction of the pace of some of these athletes would be, utterly impossible. But then, I don't know, maybe you guys probably run all the distances, but, it's a matter of perspective. So, I mean, running is interesting because you have this time, right? It's you against the clock. So it is so personal, personal best, but then at the same time, like, you want to be the first one to cross that finish line. Like the guy in the film, he still finished incredible feat, but he wasn't so happy with second place. So I think it's a matter of perspective of how you define success, but part of my, with recovery and kind of coming back from injury, the beauty of that process was that I got to redefine my definition of success and why I wanted to run. And honestly, someone would define success like of the year I've had, being able to come back from injury and compete at a world-class level again. However, when I stood on that starting line, I had no expectation of a win, of a time, of anything, and I think that's sometimes where the magic happens, is you can just run with all your heart just for sake of running. And that, I think, is successful.
Great. I've asked this question of a lot of people, and some Olympic gold medalists and some ultra distance runners. I won't name the names, but this was the best answer.
I won. Yes.
No, I have a question for you. You did 61:48 for the half, which was basically the pace of your fastest, which is incredibly fast 10-mile race. Did you feel like you were on another level during that race? Were you thinking about the time? Were you looking at splits? What did you feel like at the end? Is it something that came from within? Was it great training? And you think you can replicate it in other races?
God, I hope so. That race is one of those unique moments, and I think every runner's career where you do achieve kind of a flow state or kind of moments of transcendence. And they're incredibly rare, especially that you can put a race together where everything clicks. And that day I had a goal in mind, and I definitely went after it from the very beginning of the race. But as the race went on, I really just felt like I was floating. And I've heard Ryan Hall really describe that state as catching fire, where it just your rhythm keeps increasing and increasing, and you can seemingly push the pace with no effort. It still felt hard, but it's definitely going to be one of those moments that when I'm done, I look back on and everything came together that day. That's when it all went right. So I felt great when I finished, but I felt terrible about an hour afterwards. So it's a fleeting state.
Very cool. Todd, I have a question for you. In terms of attitude towards running, how important is positivity? Is enthusiasm? How do you look forward to racing when, there's different definitions of what your times are going to be? How do you look past, your past accomplishments and keep things fresh?
So I came at this as an age group runner. I didn't run in high school, I didn't run in college. So I've actually found a lot of PRs in my master's years. And so part of what kept me going was actually getting better the older I got, which was kind of strange. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of times where I was kind of hit or miss. It was like I'd have a good race and then I'd have a bad race, and I'd have a good race, which is why I gave up marathoning, because it was like every other marathon was a bad race and every other good one was a good race. So I was like, that's too much effort to put into that. So I started cutting my miles down a lot more. But and again, as a master's runner, as an age grouper, you're just trying to find success in the things that you do and trying to be the best that you can, as opposed to necessarily comparing yourself with others around you. You can definitely get caught up in that a little bit, but all you can do is do the work that you can do and run the races that you can. So.
Very cool. Well, I have a question for you. It's like you obviously don't get your hair cut in a mile-long race. What do you get as a miler out of a movie like this?
There are some children in the room, so I'll keep it PG, I guess. To put it mildly, I think the beauty of a film like this is that it can connect with you as a runner, regardless if your specialty is 1 mile or if your specialty is. Clearly, I think that Astronaut wanted that race to be about 3,110 miles, and he probably would have caught the guy. So it's just not quite long enough for him. You know, he needs to find that next race. But it's a feeling that we can all probably relate to. You know, how many times have I finished a mile race? If it was 1 mile and 10 meters, I would have caught that guy that was right in front of me because I was rolling that last 100. But it's so much about this. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to like this whole spiritual side, like spiritual journey, but it is like almost like I guess metaphysical does mean beyond the physical. So that would, by definition, include some spiritual aspects. But training is hard, running is hard, and watching other people do something that is hard, I think makes it a little bit easier, because you're not the only one out there suffering. It's what draws the best out of all of us is that competitive, and the best out of everyone in this room is that competitive nature, that desire to go really deep within yourself and find your true metal, what you're made of. And so every person that was profiled in this film sort of exemplified that in very extreme aspects, but something that's very relatable.
We'll open it up to questions from the audience, either for me or for the panelists. And even if it's a question to me, I'll bounce it to these guys and see what their perspective is. Anybody? If not, I've got questions too. Yes.
Anybody thinking about running 3,100 miles?
That's for you, Hillary.
Oh.
I feel like a real stone slacker after watching that. Like, man, I thought I was training hard, but I need to find a city block and just go to work.
I don't know about 3,100 miles, but I think it's something like this. I think just to echo what Will was saying, it makes you question and dream of new possibilities. So I just have this holding on to belief or kind of wonderment of, okay, what is possible for me or the human race in general.
Well, you're nodding like you want to run the 3,100.
Oh, absolutely not. No way.
I think there's obviously a lot of people in this room that are ultra runners as well, but you definitely see a trend now with people moving from the marathon into trail races into the 50 and the 100s. And I was up in Leadville a couple weeks ago watching that race. I wasn't pacing or anything, but I was watching it. There's definitely something in that about watching people finish that race and going through the struggles that they do, that you're like, wow, at some point in my life I'd like to try that, and it's not going to be next year, but the year after that maybe. There is something about that is really this human element that you're like, you can't believe that these guys have pushed through this thing. So it gets really emotional at the finish line, even though you might not even know that person or whatever else, but you can just see the emotion on their face. You can see the joy that their family has about them and how proud they are, and it's truly amazing to see. So maybe one day, but.
So, well, in no way tempted to take on a challenge like that. I think the universal idea I found from the film was the idea of like willingly accepting the hardships of your path, like kind of no matter how long that path is or where it is, but like finding joy in the process, and learning about yourself in the process. And I think we can all, though we all run different distances of varying lengths, like really relate to that process. And so it's definitely motivating to hear other people along that journey, like regardless of race distance. So that was probably kind of my main takeaway, even if I'm not going to run the race.
One of the things that we don't really make explicit in the movie is exactly what the Japanese marathon monk process is like, because there's so many numbers involved that it would require like people with calculators. So I guess class, get them out. They have to do 1,000 days of, we'll just for the sake of it, we'll call it running. 1,000 days of running split up into 10 100-day chunks. Each 100-day cycle has a set mileage for each day. So the first cycle is about 11 miles. And you saw there on there, he's wearing sandals, bamboo sandals, which disintegrate after about 20 miles. And I've got a brand of shoes that does that. I won't say it in case anybody's sponsored by them. And it's a 3,000-foot mountain, so just the gross vertical is 3,000 feet every day on that 11 and change mile loop. The aspirant that we were filming, they never actually allowed anybody to film the whole course. And somehow they gave us a secret map. It's in Japanese, so I don't think it's something I could, if I shared it, nobody would understand it. But he woke up kind of halfway up the mountain, and his first mile and a half were stairs that were each probably like this. So imagine getting up in the morning. It's 12:30 midnight, and you're climbing up foot-tall stairs, and that's like your forced warm-up. But back to the math. So by the time he gets to the fifth or sixth cycle, he's up to 35 miles a day. He goes up the mountain, kind of snakes out onto the flats, and comes back down. The last two cycles are at about 56 miles a day. And women can relate to this more than men, but in that robe, you don't want to have to disrobe and go to the bathroom. Takes a little bit of liquid in the morning after about 9 hours, which is about 36 miles in those last cycles. And he has a tea break, and that's it. He gets back, from that 56-mile trek in about 12 hours, which means, he's walking close to 12-minute mile pace, and that's including the terrain. So, when he walks really, really fast, and uphill super efficient. But this is the kicker. After the sixth cycle, he has to do an 8.5-day fast. And I say he, women have been allowed to apply over the last 2,500 years, but apparently none has in the last 400 or 500 years, and they didn't really keep records before that. So after 6 cycles, he has to do a fast for 8.5 days, which is no food, obviously, but no sleep. There are reminders by him chanting and elbowing and keeping him up. And anecdotally, they say that you can smell the last 3 meals on the person to your left and right. And if anybody's cooking on the mountain, the aspirant smells it. But then this is the thing. They have to go every day 200 meters to fetch a bowl of water to bring back to the deity that they're sitting in front of. But they can't drink water for 8.5 days. 8.5 days, no sleep, no food, no water. And apparently, in that last few days, they can hear the ash fall off of incense. And you can imagine if you did that, and somebody said to you, your next, 400 days or 56 miles a day, you go that's nothing. I've been on the threshold of the other world, kind of seen that, and I've pushed beyond it. Moved on to greater and greater challenges. So that's that. I don't know if that kind of blew me away. I felt like it was a little bit too much for the movie. The suicide thing was enough. Nobody's taken their life in the last 150 years. But until the Japanese government outlawed carrying open blades, the aspirants would carry both a blade and a roll of rope, and now they still carry a roll of rope. Good stuff. Any other questions? So I have a question for you guys. Self-transcendence, the idea of going beyond your achievements, is like Noah spoke about it. Is that a feeling that you can actually prepare for? Is there an idea that when you go into a race, obviously go in, hoping that. What do you go with? Do you hope that you're going to do your best? Do you hope that you win? Do you hope that you have a PB? What's the most satisfying thing if you kind of look at it in the most kind of raw way?
You just struck a chord on the Holy Trinity. If you can hit all 3 of those at once, you won the jackpot. I think that to a degree, on the biochemical side of that, it's the runner's high. You don't necessarily have to be in a race to experience that, but that's the drug that we're all chasing. It's that feeling. And as Noah alluded to, he ran that 61:48, but he's looking for that again. Or faster. But that feeling of floating, that feeling of this is just coming easy. When I've spoken to a guy I trained with for, 8 years, Nick Willis, 2-time Olympic medalist in the 1,500 meters, when he describes a feeling of crossing the line, knowing you won an Olympic medal, that's what keeps you coming back day in and day out. the hope is every time you step on the line, that you have that performance, that you have that whatever it is that brings the absolute best out of your body. But if it doesn't happen that day, well, that's why there's another day, there's another race. And it's like Todd was saying, well, if you do it for a marathon, that next marathon isn't for a couple of months down the road. If you do it in a mile, maybe that mile's next week. But that, I mean, I don't never really done drugs. Running sort of is my drug, and so that's why I keep going to the track. That's why I keep racing. I want that feeling because you know, again, as Noah said, you finish that race and you don't feel anything. You don't feel the effects of that physical hell you just put your body through until you come down, and it's like, oh my God, what did I just do? And you have to go to sleep for 3 days. But that's my version of self-transcendence.
So we'll stick around in case people have to jet out. The film is here 2 more nights. Tomorrow night we have Tim Olson and Kat Bradley. On Thursday we have Linda Snyder, an Olympic trials qualifying marathon, who's also from the Navajo Nation. So this film has only achieved any modicum of success thanks to people spreading the word. So please tell your friends that we're here for 2 more nights. We're in Denver for a week, starting on Friday. And yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming out.